We'll call Tuesday, May the 12th, 2020 work session open. Before we start, it was brought to our attention that while we've been voting and nobody's here, that the audience that's calling in doesn't know which commissioners voted yay or nay. So what we will do going forward until this COVID-19 issue is past us, we will actually ask Ms. Wheeler to do a roll call, so that way the people who are calling in, dialing in, will know who's voting. So with that said, I'd like to call the meeting to order once again. If you will stand, we will have the Pledge of Allegiance and invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let us pray. Father, for the day you provided, Lord, we praise your name. We thank you that we can come in a free land that we so often take for granted. We thank you, Father, that we can come and discuss the affairs of Harnett County, and what we say and do, Father, may it be acceptable and pleasing in your sight. Give us wisdom from on high for the liberation we have this day. We ask in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Our first order of business is fire districts and EMS rescue budgets. Larry Smith.
Good morning.
Morning.
I want to cover just a little bit on the fire and EMS budgets, mainly the increase requests that we've got. I'll cover the fire ones first. We have a tax levy request, increase request for one in-county department, which would be Coach Grove. They're looking for a 2-cent tax rate increase. And in their letter that I believe you have in your packet, they're listing personnel issues, aging equipment, and increased operational costs as the reason for this request. We also have one from Cypress Point. They're looking for a 1-cent tax increase. They didn't really have any specifics on that. And the Godwin-Falcon area, they're looking at a 5-cent increase. And what we believe there is that they're trying to align it with their Cumberland County tax rate, because they have a straight tax rate there of 15 cents. The Godwin-Falcon and Cypress Point, from our office, we've looked at the call volumes in those areas, and those call volumes aren't that high in those areas, where we're really stressing personnel or anything in those areas. The Coach Grove one, I've looked at their reasoning for this stuff right now. And they do have some equipment they're replacing right now. They're looking at increased costs in their personnel is the biggest thing that they're looking at right now as far as that goes for there. Any questions on those requests from them?
I guess my concern or question would be, if we do that for these and we've got the balance of our fire districts in the county, what's their thought process going to be if we keep them at the same level?
We had some requests last year where we changed a couple departments. Right now, I don't know, personal opinion again, right now, how well a tax levy increase would go over in those districts as far as the citizens go right now with everything else that's going on. These are some needs they have, but I mean, there's nothing right now that's a show-stopping need. I mean, it's just like any of the other departments right now. They've had some increased costs in some areas.
Anyone else got anything?
Larry, how has Boone Trail been able to maintain their low rate?
The chief there, Tony Curran, he's done a great job over the years of balancing the number of paid staff versus his volunteer staff. He still has a pretty good volunteer staff, and to be honest, he's very frugal with the dollar out there. Still runs everything, I mean, top notch, but he's just very frugal with his expenses and keeping his equipment a lot longer than a lot of the departments do too. Not going after a new truck to go for a new truck.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this probably wouldn't be a good time for people to have an increase in taxes of any kind.
Yeah, and I support our departments because that's my job, but I also have to look out for the taxpayers right now, and I think everybody right now with the uncertainty coming up in the next quarter or next half a year as far as taxes go and everything, and people getting back to work, I'm a little concerned about that right now. May not be good timing for it right now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Now, is that something we need to take an action on this morning or put on the agenda for commissioner meeting?
It's included in the budget.
Yes, it's in. along with Paula's recommendation for that, it's already in the budget.
You have to decide what went forward in the budget.
So we would take a vote this morning to decide if it's going to be included in the budget?
Yeah, I would probably get a consensus to
Provide direction.
forward.
Yeah.
I think we did, I think she recommended that not do anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
She just wanted to bring it before you to see if you had any questions or further discussion.
Do we need to take a roll call for that, or we by consensus agree that we're not going to include it on the budget? What's the pleasure of the board?
Well, we're gonna include it in the budget, right? We're not making that decision now, right? Because we're voting for it to be included in the budget, we're making a vote to
To not
not
increase,
include it.
Not show any increase in the budget.
not show an increase for the 3 that was requested. They would get what is budgeted, but they would not get the increase they've asked for. And that was for
Okay.
Coates, Cypress, and then Falcon Godwin.
Okay, I got you now.
We would not fund them, we just would not give them the increase.
No, okay. But they're being funded through the
Oh,
budget.
yeah.
Yes, they will be
Yeah.
funded through the budget, but that's for 2 cent at Coates, 1 cent at Cypress, and 5 cent in Falcon Godwin.
I understand.
That's the increase there. I
That's
think.
the increase they're asking for.
Okay, I got you.
We might better do a roll call.
So would you like me to cover the EMS ones first, so that you can include that just in one?
Okay, go
And
ahead.
make it easier so you're not doing two?
Okay, all right.
And as far as the EMS squads go, that's Anderson Creek, Ben Haven, Boone Trail, Boos Creek, Coates Grove, Dunn, and Irwin. We've had 3 requests for increases there. Ben Haven has asked for an $18,000 a year increase. This is due to, mainly they're looking at doing some construction, but also they've had to, internet issues where they've come on board with the county. They've worked with IRA on getting some internet issues out there taken care of at the station. And they're paying about $1,500 a month to keep internet services and all the issues to run their alarm systems within the station also. That's the main reason that they're looking there. Boys Creek is looking at a $23,927 increase, and what they're asking for here is they bought a new ambulance this past year to replace an ambulance, but they went ahead and kept the old ambulance in service as a third duty ambulance, and they're looking to cover the cost of continuing to run that third duty ambulance. Coates Grove, same thing, they're looking for an increase of $43,196, and they're listing issues as far as replacing an ambulance is what they're looking at over the next year. And then the City of Dunn EMS, they're looking at a pretty substantial increase of $338,000, and they're looking at this specifically for a 3% COLA for their personnel, and they've had a 13.1% increase in their health insurance. And those are the only increases I've got requested from there.
Mr. Chairman, you only need to vote if you want to change the recommended budget. On the 3 that requested increase.
On the fire,
On the
Yeah,
fire,
fire.
because obviously what he just laid out from EMS is, that's entirely, that's
It's different.
substantially more,
Mm-hmm.
and we're talking about,
And do we know if she included any of those in the budget?
I believe that was in her message for fire and EMS, I think. I'm pretty sure it was.
I have a question. This is Commissioner McCoy. All of these requests are outside of the budget. Is that what you're saying?
that's what they're investigating right now to see if
Yeah.
this last EMS was included in the budget. Because that would make a difference. That means it's all,
it's
there's
not
a number.
something we're paying, it's,
Paula's message says, I'm not recommending any fire tax district increases or any increases in funding for the EMS rescue districts for this fiscal year, primarily due to the current recession.
So if you want to change that, you vote. If you don't want to change it, just leave it alone.
Just leave it alone.
Leave it alone.
So that would be what we would poll. Do we want to leave the budget message as proposed by our county manager, Paula Stewart?
Do you want to change it? And then you have the final vote, you know, when you approve the budget.
Okay. So what's the pleasure of the board?
I make a motion that we not increase anything.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Got a motion by,
And this is more of a whole, because you can't
Yeah.
really vote.
it's a poll, okay. It was a motion made by Commissioner Sprinkle, seconded by Commissioner Johnson. Now we would have, you would ask to do it by name so people will know.
Okay, so Chairman Keeney,
Leave it as proposed, our budget.
okay. Commissioner Springle,
Leave it as is.
Commissioner McCoy,
Leave it as it is.
Commissioner Johnson,
Leave it as is.
Based on that, it was unanimous with those in attendance. Okay, Larry, you got anything else for us?
Yeah, just a couple things. Just want to talk about our budget as far as the county budget goes from our Office for Emergency Services. We did do some increase requests in the supply area, and Paula has put that in there, and Renee, so we're very appreciative of that. We're going to tighten our belts a little bit this year with that. We just wanted to, basically, I wanted to pass on my thanks for keeping our folks in mind during this budget process. We've got our EMS billing company that we've been with since the 1st of April. They've very pleased. We have a once-a-week budget talk with them, and what they've talked to us about this past Friday, they started billing on 1 April. Typically, it takes them about 60 days to start to see the revenue come into the company. They began to see revenues by day 8 in April. We've seen $57,896 within that first week of April. This first week of May, an additional $47,000 came in from April's billing process. They've billed over 1,200 bills, and the money's beginning to flow in. They've been very good to work with. We get daily reports from these folks, and we're able to look online. We've got a kind of a software program with them to look at what's happening every day, and it's been a very, very good transition process. So we want to thank you again for allowing us to go that route. It's helped everybody in this entire process, and I think we'll see a better revenue stream from that this year.
Thank you, Larry.
Yes.
Any questions?
All right.
Next, we have Harnett Regional Water Budget and Smart Metering Project, Steve Ward, I'm sorry.
Steve Ward.
Good morning.
Morning, Steve.
How is everyone?
All right.
Good to talk with you this morning. Mainly I want to touch on a couple of subjects. The first being our Harnett Regional Water Advanced Metering Infrastructure Project. Is that the budget you got up there now? I'm not sure what's up there. That may just be... Anyway, you'll see a project ordinance coming before you, hopefully, at the board meeting on Monday. And we've talked about this in the past, and it's in our CIP. And I'm going to talk a little bit about our CIP. That'll be part of our budget submission as well. So, but this smart metering project, to be quite frank, smart metering technology has been around for a while now. A lot of towns have already implemented this technology. For example, the city of Dunn recently completed their project where they went to the same type of technology, which basically sends a signal. You put in a smart meter at somebody's residence or business, and it sends out constant signals to a collecting tower or repeater, and by radio waves all that information comes back to the utility. So contrast that with what happens now in our system, where somebody goes out with a truck, gets out, reads a meter, and we get that one-time snapshot of what's happened since the last time we read the meter. So you've got all those variables in there to deal with. Did you read the meter within 30 days? Sometimes that's hard if you have Christmas holiday and New Year's in there, or maybe you have a staff shortage or something like that. We try to keep those periods within 30 days, and then we have to analyze somebody's data over a long term. Now contrast that with what advanced metering infrastructure offers you. It gives you an hourly reading of that meter every hour of every day. So, for example, if Miss McCoy's, she's got a leak going on, we'll know within a couple of hours the system's set up to where it'll notify us, and then we can in turn notify her that she's got a leak, rather than dealing with it on a reactionary basis when somebody gets a large water bill 30 days later, and it's been leaking somewhere between the meter and their house, and they don't know it because guess what? It's been raining, so there's water in their yard anyway. Those are the type of situations we deal with all the time now because we're still on a manual system. And these systems came out years ago, and quite frankly, I've been hesitant to recommend us expending this type of capital, and I'll talk about that in a minute, simply because our system is so large, 40,000 plus meters out there, so to do a change out is really expensive, and this project's going to be expensive. But we've sort of reached a point now to where we really need to be able to offer this service to our customers. And, as you hire more and more people to read more and more meters, you buy more and more trucks, it's getting harder and harder to get equipment for manual type systems because they're really of kind of a bygone era now. So we contracted with this firm called MeterSys about 6 months ago to help us through this process and to manage it. Currently, we have gone out for bids. We've sent out bids to all the industries who usually bid on these type projects. And it's a complicated process. It usually takes, for a system our size, it takes about 2.5 years to replace as many meters as we want to replace. So, if you can imagine, you've got a contractor coming out, and let's say they want to do everybody on Highway 210 between here and Andrew. So that takes quite a while. You've got to notify all those citizens, you've got to turn off their water. It doesn't take a long time, about 15 minutes, replace the meter, and then make sure everything works. So it's a pretty seamless process, but it takes a long time to do 40,000 plus meters. So you'll see that project coming before you. It is an expensive project. We estimate close to $14 million to do this project. Again, now that's over 2.5 years, so that limits the immediate impact somewhat. But luckily enough, we're in a financial position where we don't have to borrow any money to do this or anything like that. So we think it's time to do this for our customers, for our utility. They'll be able to go online and keep track of their meter usage. So some things we hear, for example, when somebody has a high water bill, they say, well, something must be wrong with the meter because I've been out of town for 2 weeks. Well, all we know is that from April 30th to May the 30th, the meter's telling us you use this much water. That's all we know. That's all we can tell a customer. So, but now they'll be able to go online and see exactly when that register shows that water usage. So imagine that. So we can come back and say, well, we do see that you were gone for 2 weeks, but somebody must have left a garden hose on, or there was a leak, or you had a toilet running, or something between the 10th and the 15th, because that's when this great amount of usage happened. And then, people are able to see, well, we can try to figure out what actually happened and occurred. So it's a service to both the customer and to us. And quite frankly, our customers deserve that. And a lot of utilities throughout the United States are already at that point. In fact, a lot of utilities in cities and other places have combined this smart metering technology with new fiber and with the electric grid. So the electric, the natural gas, and the water is all tied into one metering system. and everybody can monitor everything. But you can set this up to where our customers can get text. And you may already have that through Duke or South River. I know South River sends me text, you know, if something's going on. They let me know how much my bill's going to be. And if I've got really high usage, I can set it up to where if I expect to do so many kilowatt hours per day, it'll let me know if I'm exceeding that. So that's the same type situation. That's a great service to customers. And we're at the point where we should be able to provide that service to them. So you'll be seeing that project coming up. We'll get the bids at the end of May. This is just the project ordinance that you'll be seeing on Monday. So hopefully we can get started on that. Once we get the bids back, we can adjust from there depending on what the money total comes back at. And we've got lots of options there where we can go back and say, well, we think this is too much money. Here's what we want to do, etc. So just want to give you a heads up on that. That's something we're really looking forward to. It's kind of overdue, but we finally feel comfortable in moving forward with that process. So again, it'll take 2.5 years, so it is time for us to really get started in providing that for our customers. So you'll see that. Any questions on any of that?
I have one.
Okay.
Steve, this is Commissioner McCoy. I see that as an advantage for the citizens, but is there any cost to the citizens?
No, there won't be any cost. There won't be any cost to the customers. This is not going to affect, you know, their rates or anything like that. So this is just a benefit to our customers that we feel is long overdue.
I do too. I think it's long overdue. Thank you.
Steve, I got a question.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Johnson. The signals from the device y'all put on the water meter, is that sent through electronics, fiber?
It is not.
How's
It's
that?
done through radio wave transmissions.
Is there any possibility of any interference along the way that would change the reading?
We actually do, they do path studies to determine, you know, how that signal gets to a collecting tower, which would collect, for example, and I'll just use, I used before the example, everybody between here and Angier on Highway 210. So there may be a collecting tower, you know, halfway. They're about Harnett Central School somewhere. There may be a collecting tower there. So it would get all that signal from that, and then if there's a path issue in getting that back to us here in Lillington, we would put a repeater like up on the water tower on 210. Then it would send that signal to a repeater and then send it back to us. But it is an issue in Harnett County simply because, you know, in Cameron Hill, you've got an elevation of 500-600 feet, and in Dunn, you've got an elevation of, you know, 50 feet, 75 feet above sea level. So you do have some issues in Harnett County with the Piedmont coming through here, and a lot of elevation change. There's a lot of elevation change between Duncan and Bun Level. But we're used to that. We use SCADA technology now to turn on and off pumps and stuff like that. So we've already got some of these radio systems in place. So we're pretty versed in dealing with those signals.
Second question, this is Johnson again. Tamper-proof.
Yes.
I know you have people will try to change the readings on stuff, and
well, the good thing about this is the service will be locked. You know, the box will be locked, so someone can't get to the box and open it unless they, you know, get a crowbar out there and do some physical damage to the box. But as soon as anybody tampers with it, we know immediately.
okay.
Because that signal's lost, and then we get an alert. So that helps tremendously. It's not something that we would have to wait 2 weeks and say, when we went back out to read a meter and say, hey, you know, somebody's tampered with that service.
If somebody tampered with it, broke it, or hit it with a lawnmower or something, is there a replacement fee at that point?
You know, that's something that most of these systems are, and we'll determine by who gets the bid, but we've looked at several of them. Most of them are sitting real flat on the ground, and the system that comes out of the box is a little round disc that may come up 1/8 of an inch from the top flat surface of that box. So we try to get the box graded to a point where even a lawnmower at the lowest setting wouldn't clip that type thing. But there won't be a fine or anything like that that we're aware of. Now, if somebody's doing something deliberately, that's a little different. But there'll be constant issues with that type of thing. There always is. Somebody runs over a box with a tire. Somebody parks a truck on the edge of their yard and interferes with a signal or something like that. So we'll have to deal with those on an individual basis.
Thank you. You guys do a good job.
Thank you.
Steve, how about new construction? Are we asking developers to install this one as we do new construction?
We will be. For example, we will actually do the meter installation, is the way it happens, but we charge them a meter fee. So if they're bringing in a 50-lot subdivision, they have to pay us a meter fee for those 50 lots. So I think the price currently is about $75 for a manual reader, but most of them are pretty used to paying an electronic meter rate now, which I think is around $200, simply because when new subdivisions have came in, we have the drive-by capability now, so almost all of those are getting drive-by meters. So these meters aren't really any more expensive than the drive-by, they're just more updated technology. So they're already kind of used to paying that fee, but yes, they will pay when new development comes. They'll pay for those meters so the utility won't have to.
Right.
Any more questions? Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. I want to talk briefly about our budget. And our budget is really not changing to the extent it is going up about $2 million, but that's mainly because of new anticipated revenues. Our expenditures aren't really changing all that much. The revenues are due to planned rate increases for bulk water and bulk sewer. And that's to anybody who buys wholesale water or we treat their sewer for them, like the town of Angier, the town of Fuquay, the town of Lillington, and anybody we provide water to, like those 3 towns, Holly Springs, Fuquay, Verena, all those type wholesale, Johnston County, Moore County, all of those rates are going up. And when I put out a capital improvement plan, which I'll be talking about a little bit more, I plan those rate increases out. So if you look down at the bottom of that plan, I try to follow that schedule. And I usually try to do a bulk increase recommendation, every 3 to 5 years, and it'll be not the same year as a residential increase. We usually try to separate those. And to be quite honest with you, of the water that we treat and the sewer we treat, over 60% of it's wholesale. So we sell that water or we treat other people's sewer, other towns. So just to keep that in perspective. Now that includes Fort Bragg too. So for every 10 gallons we treat and produce, over 6 gallons of that is either wholesale on a treatment basis. So we've came a long way in that area. I just see that increasing. I do see, the growth we're seeing up in the northwestern part of the county. Some of that may go up as we get more and more residential customers. But our residential customers inside the county itself, in the last 4 years have really not increased dramatically. Since that growth around Fort Bragg and Highway 87 out there between Spring Lake and Sanford, since that growth has kind of died down, we haven't seen a lot of residential growth in Harnett County in water and sewer customers. We think with this growth in Northwest that's going to change some, but still the majority of our water and sewer that we treat and sell is wholesale. So this rate increase should generate about $1.5 million additional dollars in revenue for us. So that's why our budget is tracking up, because we have to match our revenues with our expenditures in order to make our budget balance. Now that doesn't mean we're going to spend all that money. Some of that money will go into fund balance and capital reserve to try to pay for projects like we just talked about. So we don't have to turn around and borrow money. That's really the smart way to do things. Any questions on any of that?
How many counties do we sell water to?
More. We sell, we've got customers in Cumberland County, and we sell water to Fort Bragg and Linden in Cumberland County, and Spring Lake in Cumberland County. I hope I don't forget anybody. We sell water to Johnston County. We indirectly sell water to Benson through Johnston County. We sell water to Moore County. And we don't sell any more water to, we don't sell water to Wake County directly, but we do to the town of Fuquay-Varina and to Holly Springs. And we've got individual retail customers in Wake County as well. So I think that's everyone. I don't think I've left anybody out. So Cumberland, Moore, Johnston, and Wake. I think that's it.
So your actual operating though was decreased by 9%. You're talking more about the CIP.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at that chart there. Our actual expenditures are down over what our actual was. I don't think it's a 9% decrease in what we budgeted last year, but our budget fluctuates a lot depending on what our revenue is and what we spend on capital projects.
Yeah, that was the question I was going to ask. I saw it's a decrease in revenue from $40 million to $36 million.
And we try to be conservative, Gordon, simply because, you know, that fluctuates. Development can add to our revenue. So even though development is happening, the way we receive those funds can alter how that goes up and down. So trying to predict that is really tough. For example, you can have lots of development on the books, but that doesn't mean that we're going to get any of that revenue for system development fees until a year and a half from now. So it's really hard to predict that.
Right.
So we try to be conservative in those revenues. And I'm going to talk a little bit about COVID-19 if you'll give me just a few more minutes. But here's an example here. How could we have predicted what's happened now? So, like projecting these revenues, when I looked at that, when I sat down last spring, I certainly didn't think about a pandemic affecting us. And if you'll give me the opportunity, I'll talk about that a little. When the governor came out with Executive Order 124, which that was at the end of March, and that basically prohibited utilities in the state of North Carolina from disconnecting somebody's water for non-payment due to the pandemic, and also charging any late fees for bills that were in arrears. If you remember, this board had already implemented that same policy a couple of weeks prior to that. Can't remember the exact day, but it was earlier than the governor's order, as most utilities around the state were already doing. But we stopped that, and as a result, we had to report to the state for the month of April. We reported to the North Carolina Utilities Commission how that had affected us, as they've asked all utilities to do in the state. And so I'd like to give you just a rundown of those numbers to give you an idea. So our delinquencies went up about 12.5% over the same time last year. Now that's a good gauge. You know, if you're looking at the same point in time last year versus this year, they went up about 12.5%. And that's anybody who's more than 30 days past due. That's what I mean by delinquencies. 6,736 of our 40,000 roughly accounts are past due. And so that equates to $67,360 worth of late fees in April that we didn't receive. Okay, so that's 1 month. We actually think May may be worse than April because of the delayed effects of job losses and what the economy's done to us and shutting it down. So from a disconnection standpoint, we did not disconnect for non-payment 2,156 residential accounts in April. So, you know, about 500 a week that we didn't disconnect. And that's a normal, maybe a little higher. We try to eliminate some of those disconnections, but that's what what we didn't disconnect. That was $86,240 in disconnection fees or reconnection fees that we would have charged customers to go back out and reconnect their water. So that totaled over $153,000 for April. So that's a direct impact to us. So the state's going to look at all those numbers and see what's going on. And I mean, we certainly think that not doing the disconnections or the late fees is the right thing to do now for our customers by the way they've been impacted. I mean, everybody needs water to fight this pandemic. And we certainly don't need to be arguing with somebody over owing $30 at the time when somebody may be sick in their household or they may not have a job or something like that due to it. So I'm not advocating for that. That's just an example of the type of revenue that we're talking about. And I predict that May is going to be way worse than that. So the state's going to get all this revenue at least through these numbers through the end of May when the executive order expires. 124 expires at the end of May, this month. So, and then we'll see what kind of dollars that we're actually talking about at that point. So, but you know, really the larger utilities, the numbers will be high, but smaller utilities are probably affected even more because they're so much more dependent upon that revenue. You know, small towns, that type of thing. So, but anyway, that gives you an example of what that is. I did want to talk about customer service. And we've talked about customer service in the past. I thought it was ironic that, you know, you guys get complaints about customer service, and I usually come back and say, well, it goes back and forth. We talk about staff not doing a good job for customer service, and I go back and say, well, it's the fact that we have to turn people's water off and charge them fees, and that's where most of the customer service issues come. But I don't know about you guys, but I've got like 0 customer service complaints since this started happening. When you stop turning off people's water and stop making them pay late fees, all that goes away. I mean, I wish we didn't have to disconnect water for non-payment or charge late fees, but that's no way to run a business. You know, eventually that'll just get worse and it'll kind of start snowballing. You know, people will get further and further behind when they don't pay their bill, and then there's no way for folks to catch up. So, you know, I just thought that was maybe at least a bright side of what's happened. But anyway, I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Commissioner McCoy, Steve, I'll make it even better for you.
Okay, all right.
I haven't had any complaints this year.
I understand. But any questions about anything else I've talked to? I did want to talk a little bit about that CIP, and I'll submit that to you. I submitted one. I was at a work session, I think it was probably 4 or 5 months ago, and and not a lot's changed on there. I have updated some things about doing an upgrade at the sewer plant here, which I think is a big project that's going to happen within 4 or 5 years, simply because of demand from other towns, because as we grow residentially,
they're going to need more and more sewer capacity. And the county is too. And that plant here in Lillington is only half the size of the plant down near Spring Lake. So this is a 7.5 MGD plant. You know, in 4 or 5 years, I think that plant, the county will need at least 12 to 15 million gallons of capacity at that plant. And that's going to be expensive because, you know, you will have to look at land issues out there, where to put different things. Technology and infrastructure costs are more expensive now than they were before, and it'll be expensive on our partners too. We won't have to bear the brunt of that cost alone, because any capacity increase that the town of Angier or the town of Lillington or the town of Fuquay, who are our partners now in this plant, if they want increases, they will certainly pay their proportional cost of any increase that we have. But a lot of the towns have already, you know, they've already talked to me about wanting more capacity. But it's not as simple as going out and making a small scale change for one of those partners. It has to be a joint operation where we go in at one time and expand the plant to provide additional capacity to the county, to the town of Fuquay-Varina, to our Harnett County towns, Lillington and Angier, our other partners as well. So everybody wants something different. You know, Fuquay will probably want more capacity than the town of Lillington or Angier. That's understandable. They're much larger. But we have to look at those things holistically and make a decision. So that's probably the only addition that you'll see on there from what we discussed 4 or 5 months ago. So,
I have a question.
okay.
The reporting that you're doing to the Utilities Commission for April and May,
Yes.
does that mean that there's a potential of getting that money back from the state?
That's a good question. There's been lots of circulation through the North Carolina Water Quality Association, through the North Carolina Rural Water Association, and many other of the lobbying arms for utilities, through the County Commissioners Association. I've gotten, you know, so certainly looking at some way to utilities to be made whole for these. You know, not doing this for customers during the pandemic. Where that goes, no one knows at this point, but I think there is a good possibility that at least partially some of this money may be returned to utilities. So we'll have to see where that goes. But yes, that's certainly out there, Gordon.
And also, the other thing is, on your CIP, have you looked at ways in which we can protect that sewer plant? Because, you know, we had some, when we had Florence came through and other, are we looking at doing some things to protect the plant better than what we have had in the, because we got pretty close.
Oh yeah. Certainly the plant is, you know, as we increase our technology there, we become less susceptible to those type of events. But realistically, if, you know, to think in the last 5 years we've had 300+ year flood events, which is really just amazing. You know, nobody in this room has seen flood events like they've seen in the last 3 years. So, 5 years anyway. So that's really amazing to think that you can prepare for that. You can to a certain extent. And we've certainly tried to do that. We've made some improvements at the plant now in the way we deal with our biosolids and some other things there. So we're a lot better off than we were 5 years ago. But this new design will have to incorporate some other measures to deal with flood mitigation issues. There's no doubt about that. You know, in the sewer business, there's kind of a saying that dilution is somewhat of a solution to the problem. So if you get a mass of water on there, it's one thing that you can't deal with all those issues, but on the other hand, the mass amount of water sort of spreads out the problem and makes it less of a concentrated issue for everybody. So, you know, when the river out there, we usually get about 500 million gallons a day of water that comes by our intake. But you know, just last February. You know, a couple of months ago when y'all saw where the river got really, really high again after about a 5-inch rain event. You know, there was 2 billion gallons worth of water going by the end of that. That really dilutes any issue about, you know, when water's moving that swiftly and that fast, it's really destructive. So I don't know if you can do a whole lot about that. We can certainly try, Gordon, and we'll incorporate some of that in our design.
Thank you.
Any other questions about anything?
Steve Dwight, Snow County Attorney.
Huh?
Hypothetically, procedurally, what's your answer to this? Let's say Joe Citizen doesn't pay his bill for April or May, you got those bills and late charges. Executive order is not renewed at the end of May. Everything's back to normal starting in June. How do you process that account?
It's really not. The executive order laid out a plan for us to deal with those customers until basically the end of the year, for 6 months beyond the expiration of the executive order. So if the executive order does terminate, as it currently stands at the end of May, you know, through the end of November, basically through the end of the year, we've got to give that customer that opportunity to pay and make that bill up within that time frame, and be as cooperative as we can. And the state's going to ask us to continue to give them that information on how we're dealing with those customers.
The key for the citizens, those 2 months are not forgiven, basically. They're still owed.
They are not forgiven. That's correct. People are still required to pay their water bills. And again, most people are. You know, 12.5% delinquency. So 87.5% of the people are paying their bills, and they're paying them on time, at least through the end of April. So of that 12.5% that may have an issue, or let's say it goes to 20%, we're going to continue to work with those citizens just like the executive order mandates us to do. And we would do that anyway. You know, if somebody calls us, and where people get in trouble even before on delinquent water bills is they wait till there's a problem and then they want an immediate solution. If they would call us before they get disconnected for non-payment, then, you know, we put a plan in place and make it much easier for them to adhere to the plan. Then they don't deal with disconnection fees and reconnection, all those type issues that they wouldn't have to deal with. So the answer to your question is we will continue to deal with those customers, and those bills are not forgiven, and they will have that balance out there if they haven't paid us for 2 months. But we will be as lenient as we can with them and give them opportunity, you know, over that period to try to make those payments and catch up.
I'm assuming for those 2 months, though, under that scenario, the late fees would be waived.
That's correct. We don't go back and recharge any fees associated with what has been dismissed during the period.
So what would happen if the state decides, I guess I'm getting money from the feds, that we can be reimbursed for this lost revenue?
Mm-hmm.
How would that affect the citizen? Would they still have to pay, even though we've gotten our money back?
Well, the citizen, you know, nothing's changed for the citizen. The only person that's out any revenue is the utility.
Right.
Because instead of charging a late fee for non-payment,
Okay.
you know, you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
But I don't think any of that's been looked at from our perspective. That would certainly be an internal decision, what we do with the money or anything like that. But the citizens, nothing changed. You know, the bill would have been there before the pandemic or after the pandemic, and they're not being charged for being late or being delinquent. So.
I assume the revenue would be for the late fee and the reconnect fee, probably.
Correct.
That's not being charged.
Correct.
The General Assembly will have to decide.
We're not giving them the, you know, we're just giving them the amount of the fees. They're not looking at the amount that hasn't been paid and then reimbursing us for that.
Right.
All that's being looked at being reimbursed by any kind of replacement money is just what the utility lost.
Right.
And that'll run through December as the executive order states.
Correct. I think it's 6 months from the, I think it's 6 months from the end of the EO.
I think you're right.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next up is general budget discussion. I guess that would be Mr. Coley Price.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. This is Coley Price along with Brian Haney. We're going to be kind of filling in for Paula this morning, and also for Renee Pascal, our budget director, had an appendicitis. She is in the hospital now, so we wish her well.
She's home in this.
Oh, is she? Okay, I'm sorry. We wish you well. All right, so just a few comments that we'd like to make, and then I'd like to open it up for any questions that you may have. Obviously, last Monday, May 4th, County Manager Paula Stewart presented the budget. I read the budget message and went through that, and you've had a chance to kind of look through that over the past week and absorb a little bit of that. So I'd just like to make a couple of comments to open up if you'll allow me to. First of all, actually some of Renee's comments, which I totally agree with. In her 27 years and my 25 years of preparing budget, never seen anything like this. As Paula mentioned last Monday, we went from what we should add to what can we cut. And this happened so quick, it happened in a matter of weeks. As Paula mentioned last Monday, in January and February, everything was looking good, and we were excited about the economy and plowing forward with economic development, and then all of a sudden the brakes went on, and something that we've never seen before. So with that being said, we're going to continue to monitor our revenues. We're going to look, we're conservative, but we're thinking, were we conservative enough? So what we're going to do is look at it month by month and see what comes in, and hopefully by January or so, after about 6 months, we can get a better feel for where we stand from a revenue side, and that we can kind of add back things that we had cut out. We also may need to make additional cuts. Again, there's a lot of unknown there, so that's something we're going to continue to monitor and look at. We've developed new revenue trending methods that should help us see these problems early, which I applaud Renee's efforts for putting all that together and helping out in that manner. And we need to maintain as much flexibility as possible by not adding things to the budget. So several key things to us when presenting a balanced budget. First of all, I'd like to commend the board for your stewardship of the fund balance. And that's what a fund balance is for. It's for things of natural disasters, sometimes unforeseen, whether it's hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, and God forbid, this COVID-19. So that's one good thing that we can say with the County of Harnett, with the fiscal conservative responsibility that this board has looked at. It has allowed us to kind of sustain and put a balanced budget together as we move forward. Second, our process and work of our departments did to address over budgeting expenditures really paid off, and the departments reduced their continuation requests by more than $1 million. So that was key. As Renee came in and analyzed a lot of this, we had an expansion budget, continuation budget, so they were able to cut that by more than $1 million in continuation. That's one reason we were able to bring you a balanced budget at this point. So I'd like to thank everybody for their efforts on that and putting all this together. One thing I'd like to mention, understanding your priority as a board is economic development. We totally understand that. Again, back in January, February, everything was rolling good. We were at a 50-year low in unemployment. We were piggybacking off of Raleigh-Durham being the second hottest market in the nation in real estate. We saw that wave moving forward with the Board of Commissioners, the Properties Corporation, as well as the Economic Development Council. There were a lot of things of the momentum that's been put in place, which is a good thing that I want to talk about briefly. Our Economic Development Office, led by A.G. Stewart, had surveyed, had platted, and had appraised the properties that were transferred over by this Board of Commissioners in April, which has been a tremendous asset to help move us forward in these times that we're in right now. That will continue. You're going to see that happen at your next Properties Corporation meeting. You're going to see bids for brokers to come in. You're going to see the Economic Development Council in collaboration with the Properties Corp come together with a marketing plan, and that's going to be looked at on a month-by-month basis to kind of see where we're at. As you're well aware, as far as Brightwater and Edgerton, that was the properties that were transferred over. That is now in the hands of the Properties Corporation. and we're excited about the opportunity that is in front of us, and that will continue with the marketing efforts there. I don't know if you've been over to Brightwater lately, but they have substantially, I think, completed the process on Lot 2 with the Golden Leaf Foundation grant and the money that the county put in as well. The stormwater ponds are in, the curb and gutters are in, the sidewalks are in, the road has been paved, and that area has been seeded, and the landscaping is coming in the very near future. You're also seeing the Brightwater sign. I hope you've been able to see that at night. It's very, very nice. It's very tasteful. It defines the Brightwater Business Park as well as Central Harnett Hospital. And so we were very pleased with that process, with putting that in place as well. So with that being said, you've had the process of the budget presentation on May 4th. Obviously, this is the workshop here on May the 12th. We are looking at doing a public hearing on May the 18th, and then we'll have another workshop on May the 26th. Then you'll have your Board of Commissioners meeting on June 1st. And if you are comfortable with everything moving forward, possible adoption on June 15th at your evening Board of Commissioners meeting. So, Brian, do you have anything you'd like to add or share?
Not really. I do think that, as Coley said and Renee has iterated, the process that we have adopted is a good process for the future. We weren't certainly anticipating COVID-19 to come about, but the process of the cuts that have been made by departments themselves, have gone a long way to helping everybody balance this budget. Again, we will be continuing to assess and look at the budget on a monthly basis going forward to see, are things getting better than we projected, or are things potentially getting worse? Obviously, nobody knows where this is headed. However, our guidance to departments will be, be fiscally responsible as they are as we go forward. Because if more cuts need to be made, the less if you don't have to spend it, don't spend it. If a position, somebody leaves a position, consider not filling that, just to have that available so that the impact will be less if it has to be. But hopefully it will not be. But that's pretty much where we are and where we're going forward next year.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, thank you, Brian.
There is one thing I'd like to point out. I think you have this in front of you where it says Appendix 1 recommended fee changes. And we apologize for this. We inadvertently left out 5 fee increases that we would like to propose. On the front of the list there, you see animal services are the first 4. One is the rabies lab testing container fee. The other one is the livestock adoption fees, small livestock adoption fees, the third, and the poultry fowl adoption fee. You can see the proposed fee amounts and the justification for that. And basically, these 4 are just to cover the cost as far as what we're doing in that particular department. If you'll flip a couple of pages over, you'll see another red highlighted area for general services restitution. That's the juvenile restitution service fee. We were currently charging $5, and we're asking to go to $7.25, which is being increased due to federal minimum wage as recommended by the North Carolina Department of Public Safety. So all that's doing is just going to minimum wage. And that goes back to the solid waste. What that does is for the hours the juveniles early maintaining picking up waste on the county roads. That's basically what that is. So if you don't have any questions of those, we would like to add that to the proposed rate and fee schedule.
All of this will go into the budget,
Yes, ma'am. That will be added to
added to the budget.
Yes, ma'am. Those 5. And there's one other thing I would like to point out, that this is not on the rate and fee schedule. This is actually a contract, and I just want to make sure you were comfortable with this. Back in 2008, the county moved to help the towns of Angier, Coates, Lillington, and Earlham with animal services, which was a tremendous asset. I was serving as Angier town manager there, and was tickled to death to have that service. So in 2008, that started, and it received very well by all the towns, and it's worked out well for the county. There was a $10,000 fee per year to do that service, which, in my opinion, was really good. We have never increased that. So we were looking at moving that up $2,000 from $10,000 to $12,000. I do realize in the times that we're dealing with now, what we're up against, I just wanted any opinions or thoughts or comments that you had about that. I'll be glad to entertain or answer any questions you may have.
I have no problem with increasing it.
I do feel it's justified. I have talked to all the town managers. Brian and Paul and I met with them in February and March, and we explained in detail, and they understood that. And I think they feel like I do, that it's a very needed service, and there's no way that they can have that kind of service for the amount of money that we're charging.
No.
Yeah.
So it's $166 a year and 12 years increase. So if you're comfortable with that, I just wanted to bring that to your attention. We'll add these 5 increases if you're comfortable with that. And Brian and I are available for any questions that you may have. I know you just got it last Monday, and I'm sure you're absorbing it, but if there's anything specific you would like to ask, we'll be glad to try to do that. If not, we will get you an answer on the 26th at your workshop.
Do we have a consensus of the board? We want to add these items?
Yes.
Yes.
Everybody shook their head affirmative, so that was a yes vote by all 4 in attendance.
Thank you.
Next up is a request by District 11A Veterans Treatment Court to apply for a 3-year, $500,000 grant from the U.S. Department of Justice, Bureau of Justice Assistance, Mark Tichy.
I'm looking forward to getting all this money that we hit it after the audit that we got from last year from Kimberly added to our fund balance.
That's true.
Got it on her head.
If I ever come back and tell you I want another software upgrade,
Mark is not here yet. He was supposed to be here for 10:45. I did tell him to come shortly after 10, so I'm sure he's on his way. Do we want to continue?
Well, we can go to Thomas,
Yeah,
if he's available, we'll get Thomas.
we can do that.
We're going to change our schedule around a little bit. Next will be proposed revisions to the Harnett County Board of Commissioners Rules of Procedures regarding electronic meetings. Thomas Royer will make that presentation while we're waiting for Mark Teacher to get here.
Good morning. How are y'all doing today?
Good.
Okay.
I appreciate you all giving me some time here to talk to y'all today. I just wanted to fill y'all in. I guess it was about 3 weeks ago I've been talking with Gina about the rules of procedure that we have in place for our meetings. And she expressed the concern that the rules really seem to be written for in-person participation of all of the meetings that we have. At the time, we were talking, I was of the opinion that obviously being in a state of emergency, I think the risk was pretty low to move forward with the remote meetings and having folks call in, especially considering the executive order that we had and the state of emergency that the county put in place. Apparently, I wasn't the only one that thought that. The General Assembly, had been soliciting some questions and feedback from folks, and in the session law that they just passed last week, 2020-3, they actually addressed this, and they made it retroactive for the entire period of the state of emergency that we've been under with COVID-19, and this will be effective moving forward for all states of emergency. We had looked at this prior to all this information coming out, so some of the stuff we have in here is just based off of what we have taken from, consultation with other counties, talking with other county attorneys, other clerks. And then I also added information specifically related to the session law. And if you would allow me, I'd like to just run through that with you all real quick and just give you a brief synopsis, highlighting a couple of areas that may warrant some discussion, if that's okay. So Gina, if I could have you turn to, I believe it's page 4. Starting with Rule 7, it's all meetings within the county. So I've added right below the original Section A, I've added a new Section B. And essentially, what it does is add the opportunity to participate in remote meetings. There had been some back and forth on, like I mentioned earlier, whether remote meetings were allowed for local governments. It seemed that the Attorney General's office was of the opinion that remote meetings were allowed. School of Government seemed to think that they were not allowed. it was nice to go ahead and have the General Assembly address this for us and just put this whole issue to bed. So the remote meeting, being defined under the Act of where one or more of the board members are participating remotely by electronic means. So, I guess you could say it wouldn't apply if you have all the members present, but, in a situation where we find ourselves in right now, we don't have, members of the public available to access in person. You would still want to follow some of the guidance that's in here just because it makes it a little easier for members of the public to follow along. This subsection that what I want to draw your attention to, maybe have some discussion on, is that this subsection limits the types of business that could be handled by members that are participating remotely. Namely, it says that they will not be able to participate in quasi-judicial hearings or closed session. It appears in talking with other county attorneys that there is some concern out there regarding participating and ruling on quasi-judicial proceedings and the sort of attacks that could be presented with any sort of appeal that could take place. Furthermore, the issue has also been raised with regards to the confidentiality of closed sessions. How do we ensure that, folks participating remotely, that there may not be someone else in the room or inadvertently it may be broadcast out there. So, while the session law goes through and says that folks participating remotely may participate in quasi-judicial proceedings and in closed session, I added that language in there so that way maybe we could talk about it and I could get some feedback on how the board feels about whether we do want to limit that based on some of the concerns I've been hearing, or whether we just want to go forward as the statute is written.
So what you're saying is that it says on the, I guess this is this is rule number 21.
Well,
Right.
This is Rule 7 and B. There's a sentence that I added in there that says business that cannot be handled by remote participation include quasi-judicial hearings and closed sessions. And that's on page 4, Commissioner Sprinkle.
It's 37 in the package and 4 in the rules of procedures.
Rule is 4.
Rule 7.
Rule 7.
Yeah,
page-
that's what I was at. But I went on down to the,
I believe you're referring to the voting
yeah,
section as well, and this just kind of reiterates what can be voted on, but this is more of just general participation in Rule 7. So obviously whatever is decided here, it would impact both Rule 7 and the rule with regards to voting.
I don't understand what you're saying. This is Commissioner McCoy.
Sure.
I don't understand what you're saying. Make it in plain, simple English so we can understand. Or you're saying that we can't participate if we're not here, or what are you saying?
What I'm saying is some of the language that you're seeing other counties and other local governments adopt is that commissioners that participate remotely, that are calling in on the phone line, that they would not be participating in a quasi-judicial hearing, or they would not be participating in a closed session.
But you would everything else.
And
It's
but
like
you
when
would.
call in.
That's what I'm just
Yeah,
trying
when
to
you
say,
call
because
in-
when I call in, I participate in the meeting, but I don't participate in the closed session.
that's right.
And that's
Correct.
how we handle that. And that's
Yeah.
what this would put
Right.
in writing if y'all agree
That's right.
to that.
Right, well, I don't have a problem with that, because my health is more important than this position. I'm gonna tell you right now.
And this was just trying to take the most conservative approach to balance folks' welfare as well as, any sort of issues that may be out there by having folks participate remotely in that type of business.
Well, the quasi-judicial verbiage in there is for, I guess, Board of Adjustments.
It would be for any actions that are appealed from the Board of Adjustments for the Board of Commissioners' consideration. That's probably the most likely scenario. Yes, sir.
That would include rezoning hearings.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Mhm.
So the key element from the Commissioner's point of view is, well, if I'm participating remotely, why can't I participate in a rezoning hearing? And the argument is, well, you're not there to see the exhibits and that type of thing. You're not there to see whether the witnesses are believable or not and things like that. So if you don't have that ability, how can you really, not, in an intelligent way, knowingly vote on a hearing like that, and that's what we're talking about.
Good point.
Let me ask the question. How have the other counties been handling this? Because what I've been told, they are certainly been handling the same way we have. We have handled it. Is there any difference?
No,
Some have had closed sessions.
yeah, there have been some that have had closed sessions that have been going on. There are others that have opted not to do that. The ones that have had closed sessions, I was on a discussion on Friday with some other attorneys about this, and they said that in their counties that they haven't had any problems with closed sessions, that, you know, from their standpoint, there may be a concern that, you know, obviously they don't know if there's somebody else on the other end of the call besides just the commissioners, but, you know, they trust that the commissioners are doing everything they need to maintain the confidentiality of the information. So, I mean, there is a concern out there, but, you know, if the board feels that the concern is minimal based on the precautions that are being taken by each individual member, then I think that's an appropriate response as well. It's really just to gauge how y'all feel about conducting closed business remotely.
Well, I'm going to say that I think this board has acted very responsible, and when we do have, I haven't participated in a closed session, but you send me the material. We have the material for our meetings and all. If there was something that needed to be addressed and needed the voice or the vote of every commissioner here, I cannot see why you can't send that information to us too. That's just my opinion.
Or at least give you a call.
At least that's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's my opinion, because it could really affect everybody that's sitting around this room. And we don't know what the future going to hold. But business must be take place here in this county. We must continue to address the issues of running this county. And I personally feel that includes closed sessions too.
I agree with Chairman Penny. I agree with Commissioner McCoy's. I can understand the not voting, but I can't understand the commissioner not being on remotely to hear, because it does impact financially, or the possibility of impacting financially the county. Therefore, all five, in our case, 5 commissioners should be privy at the same time to the same information. I don't have a problem with the person remotely not necessarily voting, but that should not exclude them from hearing the information.
Okay. I'm more than happy to take that out if that's the pleasure of the board.
Well, let me say one more thing. I don't personally think that it should interfere with them voting. I honestly do feel that way, because we are committed and intelligent commissioners serving on this board. You didn't elect us, and the state didn't elect us. The constituents in each one of our districts elected us, and they expect us to serve them to the best of our ability. So that is what I have to say. I see nothing wrong with it. I have an office in my home. No one is there but me. The information that this board received, each person on this board received, I should receive that information too. And that's all I'm saying. Thank you.
My only comment, Barbara, would be what we're trying to do is come up with some rules that's going to apply not only now but in the future.
I agree.
We know what our board is all about. We don't know what future boards are going to be about. And as Dwight can tell you, in the past we have had some issues with closed sessions and information in the closed sessions, even without being remote. So we're trying to look at what's best for now and in the future. So I understand where you're coming
And
from.
that, you're gonna continue to have that.
Oh, yeah,
That's not gonna stop.
no,
And it doesn't have to be a pandemic.
no, it doesn't.
But I think we, the 5 that serving for this county, have acted very professional
Oh, absolutely,
and committed to the people of this county.
yeah.
And all these recommendations, it's not with this board in mind. It is agnostic just based on the guidance that has been passed down from the general statute. So that's really kind of what, and just kind of hearing best practices of what's taking place from other counties. So please keep in mind, as these rules were written, it has nothing to do with this board or, future boards or past boards. It's just trying to think of, okay, if you just look at this as a board, what would you want in there? And like I said, it's up to the board's pleasure on what they want in there or what they want taken out. So I'm more than happy to take out the closed session. And I'm assuming, based on Dwight's comments, was there any other thought on quasi judicial hearings? Do we want to keep that in there, or do we want to strike that as well?
Attorney Snow, I saw you about to articulate something, so do you have any?
Well, I'm going backwards, but since you recognize me, County Attorney Dwight Smith talking here, in reference to Ms. McCoy's comments, I would think if you vote to go ahead and say you can participate, a commissioner can participate in a closed session remotely, you might as well let them vote remotely also. I mean, if they're going to participate, you might as well be able to vote. The way I would say, go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. As I thought into what I said, if you're there listening to it, you just, obviously you need to be able to vote too, because yeah, it's a moot point if you don't have that ability, so.
Right.
All right, so jumping forward to that duty to vote on Rule 21, we will allow voting during closed session as well.
Right.
And this is only during a state of emergency, correct?
That is correct. The remote participation is only authorized by law, at least under the session law, during the state of emergency.
Thank you.
I agree with that.
Okay, so jumping to page 5 of the Rules of Procedure, the Rule 8 with regards to broadcasting and recordings of the meeting. In the past, that's mostly dealt with how we handle the broadcasting and recording for radio and television. I went ahead, there is a rule that was added in here based on what's come out of that Session Law 2020-3, pretty much saying that during a state of emergency and there's a remote meeting, that the meeting will be broadcast by streaming online, similar to what we are currently doing right now, or conference called, where the members of the public can join in on the conference call line to listen to the meeting. Once again, it's just trying to open up the meeting for citizen participation, input, and keeping everybody well informed of the business of the county. And this does comply with the new session law. Since we have obviously been conducting most of our remote meetings by conference call, I wanted to make clear that, with conference call, we have to make sure that we provide a line for citizens to call into.
But Thomas, wouldn't you try to specify that this would only apply to meetings where you ask where public comment is available? See, when you have a work session, public comment is not available.
That is correct, and I believe
you're not saying that in this. If I read it correctly on Rule 8C.
correct. Well, this is just more really about having the business being broadcast. So
Okay.
it's not necessarily about the public comment. I mean, if a meeting would call for public comment, then we'd have to make that available. But like a work session today, folks can still call into the conference call, but obviously there's no public comment capabilities.
So you don't have to state that in that rule then.
Once again, it's the pleasure of the board. If y'all would like for me to do that, I'm more than happy to
You
do
see
that.
what I'm saying?
And there's a public comment section within the rules of procedure that you may could add, specify if you put language in there for that, also put it in there too.
Yeah.
Well, Commissioner McCoy again, in our meetings that we we've been having as far as work sessions, there are times we have that the public is not allowed, right? And then there are times that the public can come and sit in.
Well, they can come in, but they can't,
They can't,
there's no comment.
no comments.
Right.
I think that we should continue to carry on business in that way.
Yeah.
And this is just in addition to the language that's already in there, so I mean, it's not like during a time of, state of emergency and remote participation that it replaces the rest of the rules. It would be read in conjunction with, so,
Okay.
the public comment period that's referred to, and I think is what Commissioner McCoy is referring to later on in the document, that would still control on when the public could actually comment versus when they would not be able to.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Mr. Sprinkle? Okay. Gina, if we can move on to page 6 of the Rules of Procedure, that would be Rule 11. Now, this is something that I noted to Gina before that I felt that our board was doing a great job with during remote participation. Essentially, it is just having the members of the board identify themselves. So action taken by the board, Rule 11, during remote meetings or when a member is participating remotely, that prior to any motion being made, that the moving member would just identify themselves, which I think everybody's been doing a great job with so far. It was just written into the statute, so I wanted to make sure that we're very clear here that, what we've been doing is the way we're going to move forward.
Yep.
Okay. And then, Gina, if we go to Rule 16, debate. Once again, it's the exact same thing as we're discussing any motions or any action pending before the board, that as members are speaking, they just identify themselves. And then Rule 21, Gina, that's duty to vote. And Commissioner Springle, I believe this is what you were referencing earlier about whether to vote or not during closed session. Based on the board's recommendation, I will go ahead and change that to allow voting during closed session, since we are going to allow participation in closed session. And this is something I've noted that we've also been doing, but the statute requires that all meetings, when the votes are cast during a remote meeting, that it be taken by roll call. I know that's not something we normally do when everybody's here in person and we're open to the public, but that's something that is in the statute for state of emergency. But once again, I feel like our board's been ahead of the curve on most of this stuff. So we're just putting how we're currently acting. We'll just move forward with that. And since we are limiting participation during quasi-judicial matters going forward, I'm assuming we would also want to have that prohibition on voting on quasi-judicial matters in this voting section. Still Rule 21. Just want to get confirmation of that before I move forward with the next one. And that's, I believe, the last sentence of Rule 21.
Right.
Okay. Moving on to Rule 26 regarding quorum. Essentially, it restates what we've been doing, but apparently a lot of counties had problems with this on how they actually figured out quorum during remote meetings. But General Assembly, once again, pretty much, I don't know if they just adopted what we've been doing or what, but it's pretty much how we've been operating. During remote meetings, meetings where in meetings where remote participation is allowed, the majority of the board present in person or electronically. So essentially it allows quorum to be calculated by using members that are not only present in the room, but also folks that are calling in or joining via video conference, if that's something, you know, we ever get to.
Let me ask a question on that, just give you a hypothetical. Let's say you have a state of emergency, you got a remote meeting, and I can't see it happening, but if it did, you had a rezoning hearing at that meeting. And you had 2 members present in person and 1 member present remote. And the other 2 were neither way, they were just not there, without a quorum.
I do not believe it would be a quorum, just based on the fact that we are limiting participation for quasi-judicial hearings. Furthermore, I believe what you're dealing with is a situation where you wouldn't have the requisite number of members present to move forward with business for that particular action. So I think what you could do in that instance is you could use that 3rd member that's participating remotely to essentially reschedule quasi-judicial hearing.
9 times out of 10, they're not going to have a hearing to begin with, knowing that's going to happen. But if you did, they could just table it.
Right, because tabling it and moving it to a later date is not part of the quasi-judicial hearing.
Right.
It's just removing it from the meeting agenda. So I mean, it's kind of a.
But the key is, if somebody forced the issue, you just say, well, we don't have a quorum.
Correct.
Yeah, that's it.
I think that would be the better way, thinking back from my days as chairman of the Board of Adjustments, and if we say we only had 3 members there that night, and knowing how someone may feel.
Right.
It would not be fair to the applicant to proceed, and we'd always ask, do you want to delay your hearing to the next meeting? Being there's only 3 people, I think the same would apply for us. It would not be fair to the applicant nor to the commissioners to be put in a position where they may have angst about their vote.
Well, you know, to your point, the reason they're appealing is, well, A, they don't like the decision, but B, they want to put it to the full vote of the board. In that situation, you're putting it in the hands of essentially 2 people. I mean, that's less than what you had with the Board of Adjustment.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's practically speaking, it makes sense to move it forward, but, you know, to your point, I don't think it would be fair either.
All right, thank you.
I don't either. I think you need a quorum.
Yep.
Okay, now Gina, I wanted to, and if you could move down to Rule 27 real quick for me. And this is regarding public hearing time limits. And this was not in the packet, but this was a discussion that started heating up about Thursday and Friday of this past week, and I at least wanted to bring it to your attention and act accordingly based on kind of your reaction here. Within the statute, there is a requirement that was placed on for public hearings, so that anytime there is a meeting where there is remote participation, that the public have the ability to comment up to 24 hours after the hearing. So the way it would work is from the time it's noticed, the public would be able to provide input, and then up to 24 hours after the hearing, they could send in written comment. So there seems to have been a lot of back and forth among other local government entities about, does that mean in a public hearing that the board can vote, accept comment for 24 hours afterwards, and then go back and amend their vote later? It seems that kind of the prevailing view has been that essentially you would have the public hearing, you would then essentially recess the meeting until you've had 24 hours to receive those comments, and then you reconvene just to vote after you've had that period. I didn't put it in here because it didn't really strictly deal with the meeting aspect, but as this started heating up late last week, I wanted to at least bring it to your attention that there is a 24-hour comment period that was in this legislation. It seems to kind of started working itself out among what the consensus is on the requirements with that. I'd be more than happy to add language to that effect to this, but
But wasn't it determined that is only if there's remote participation?
That's only if there's remote participation. So even during a state of emergency, if all 5 members are here, there would be no 24-hour requirement. It's only if someone were to participate remotely. So I mean, it's kind of strange in the aspect of it's not going to apply to all meetings during a state of emergency. It's just to ones where someone calls in for a normal public hearing.
You're saying that if we had a situation where we're rezoning and you have all the commissioners here, but somebody calls in remotely,
No, if all the commissioners are here, it's moot.
So right. So a remote meeting is only if members of the board.
oh, okay,
call
remember,
in.
okay, I got you.
So
Okay.
if all 5 members are here, then it would not be considered a remote meeting
Gotcha.
under the statute. So it wouldn't trigger that 24-hour requirement. But if you know, Commissioner Springle, if you called in remotely during that time, then it would trigger that 24-hour comment period.
Gotcha.
Now, some of the other requirements we have on comments that are statutorily required, we don't have in here per se, so I mean, we don't have to put it in there, we just have to know that that is a requirement, but as this is a good reference tool for everybody during the meetings, we could add it in there if y'all would like.
Commissioner McCoy, correct me if I'm wrong, Gina, but isn't that the way that we have proceeded in the past?
Well, not with the 24-hour delay, because you've all been here for these things.
But
This is new. Say the budget public hearing coming up, one of you had to call in, that's when it would trigger the 24 hours. But if all 5 of you are here following that public hearing, you can do as you please.
okay,
But this 24-hour thing, that was a new thing that was this put into effect last Monday or Tuesday?
I think last Tuesday.
But if you put it in your rules, it's during a state of emergency, and it would only apply if one of you had to call in.
Well, Commissioner Penny, I'm kind of confused about that, because if you've got 5 commissioners, 4 of them are present, one's not. Obviously, you've got more than a quorum of the board present. So how does the 24 hours come in? It looks like it's almost double jeopardy, because the one that's not here,
If they called in, Howard, if they called in, it would trigger it. If they didn't call in and the commissioners were here, it wouldn't trigger it.
okay.
So if you had quorum and held a public hearing, so you only had 4 commissioners present, and the 5th just didn't participate.
If they didn't participate,
Right.
so then it's just like 5 are here.
That's right.
Okay,
Yes,
but we didn't discuss that, any verbiage in there. Just make sure if we're gonna put something in writing, there's no vagueness about it, I guess is.
The only thing would trigger it would be if you had somebody remote.
Right, so it would be the participating members of the board, not necessarily of the board as a whole.
Okay.
And can I ask real quick, and I'm sorry to spring this on you all, but here it says the time limits for speakers at zoning public hearings are 10 minutes and 3 minutes, but this board doesn't time people during our public hearings. So I'm wondering if we shouldn't, while we're looking at updating, either, you know, is everybody, we don't time people during the public hearings. And it's this language here, so do you want that in there and we're not doing it? Or do you want to start adhering to that?
Interesting question, because, you know, some things are not controversial and there's almost nobody here and it goes by. Then sometimes you've got an auditorium full of people and 10 minutes is not, the commissioners probably would like it to be only 10 minutes, but is that fair to the public if it's something that's equally divided pro or con? So that would be, I don't see a problem the way we've been doing it. I mean, but I see what you're saying. This puts a limit of 10.
Or is this quasi judicial when it says from both sides? Or do we have y'all's okay to?
See, what it's saying here, though, it is saying that if you're opposed to something, the whole group has 10 minutes. If you're for it, you want the whole group has 10 minutes. And we've never done that.
Yeah, we haven't. I'm not.
I don't see putting a time limit on it, would be my personal observation. It's rezoning or anything to do with property is sensitive, possibly on either side, so.
And I believe reading through 153A this morning, I believe the reason why it's that way is because the board has the power to say, okay, the group that's for, y'all figure out who's going to speak on your behalf. You got 10 minutes to speak. The group that's against, figure out who you want to speak, and you got 10 minutes.
We do.
So you have that authority, which I'm wondering if maybe that's where this is derived from. You know, I can't speak to that
We never take
exactly,
that
but,
position.
you know,
Yeah, we don't
if that's not the
follow
way we do it, then, you know, this doesn't quite make as much sense with
Well,
those
we've
time
encouraged people to do that, but we've never put a time limit on it.
Right.
Would we kind of address that without, and the board has the authority to do what they want?
I guess I'm suggesting,
Without having
can we remove A, given we don't follow that, if no one sees a reason for it to be there?
Has other boards had a problem with it?
Well, we don't address this.
Depends.
But we can't just shut out the public. We must allow the public to express themselves. And that is the time that they should express themselves when we are voting on an issue that is gonna affect the public.
Absolutely.
So, I think we should leave it like we've been doing this for many years. And it seems to satisfy everybody because the public has the right to speak.
Commissioner Penny, and if we put a time limit on it, we're gonna get more pushback from putting the time limit than leaving it like it is. And as Commissioner Springle has said, our past it, we've always asked if there's a large group here, do you have a spokesman? Would you, in essence of time, let that person be the spokesman for the group, and then all this person speaking for, raise your hand. That way it's duly noted by the city commissioners. That, unless you other commissioners know something I don't, that has always worked well for Harnett County. So
I think it should be that way.
I think it should remain the way we've got it.
I think so. I mean, having been on the other side of been the citizen that's coming to some of these, hearings and, wanting to say something, part of it is to be able to speak your mind. And if you're limiting them, man, you may walk away with some bitter folks. So I think the way that y'all been doing it is
So can we eliminate that A then?
I think if y'all would like to take A out, we could take A out and just reformat it, and
I think we should.
So that'll be
There.
included in these revisions. We'll
Right.
get it on.
But now, it's only, this is Commissioner Springle, but this is only talking about zoning, but we've done it on everything.
Yes.
We've not limited it on any issue, whether it's zoning or whether it's ordinance or whatever it is. We've never limited public comment.
okay, because I noticed that the last sentence there says that time limits for speakers at other public hearings will be limited to 3 minutes per speaker, but
No.
I mean, we can just strike the whole thing.
Yeah,
That's right.
We've never limited that. The only 3 minutes is during our public comments. That's 3 minutes per person. Other than that, we've never put a limit on it. And
That's right.
I don't think this board is in favor of doing limits.
You will take it all out.
Yeah.
27.
Yes, take it all out.
So 27A will be stricken.
Right.
And then would the board like to add something with regards to the remote participation and the public hearing, 24-hour requirement for public hearing comments? Or do we just want to note that it's a statutory requirement and it's just something that has to be complied with?
So summarize again for the board the requirements as you see it from the state on what you just talked about.
So the requirement is that when there is a remote meeting, meaning that a member of the board is participating remotely, that it triggers,
You got a state of emergency.
if you're in a state of emergency, there is a 24-hour time period requirement in that citizens can provide written comment to the board for 24 hours after the time of the hearing to pretty much state their opinion. And what that does is it would require the board to recess the hearing to gather those comments, reconvene at some date that would be decided at the time that you recess, to then vote, now having taken into consideration those comments that came in for the 24-hour period after the hearing.
Question,
Yes, sir.
we do that. Date certain, we bring it back up. You've got 4 members here present again. Does that re-trigger another 24 hours?
No, sir.
Good.
The reason why
And
is,
it's the remote person, not the 4 members present.
Suppose that that person is here next time and another person is remote.
No.
I just want to make sure we don't have a loophole in our,
no, it's not based on the individual members, it's based on the fact that the definition of a remote meeting has been met, which just means
okay.
you have a member participating.
Right.
So,
But Thomas, you mentioned two things, two different things. One, you said it's triggered by a commissioner not being here and it's on remote. And then you talked about the public comment. So it's not the public comment that we're asking about. We're talking about a commissioner not being here and in remote.
correct, it's the commissioner not being here that triggers the 24-hour requirement.
Okay.
No, a commissioner not being here and participating remotely that triggers the 24-hour requirement.
Okay.
And the one thing I ask, as we're looking through and revising the rules of procedures a little bit now and trying to tighten those up, it's a quick reference for all commissioners, for the clerk, for Dwight and all. I know we don't have everything in there, but as these things come up like this, it would be a quick reference there, and we wouldn't have to go back to the general statute
Right.
if you did include the blurb.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll just add that requirement, I guess, now what will be the new B, since we struck A.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for indulging me on that. I know it wasn't originally on there, but kind of came up on Friday, and I was like, you know, it's better to get some input on this.
I don't want to beat this horse to death, and County Attorney Dwight knows that. Just want to make sure, when you say it comes from the state, no, I'm not going to get into that. Well, if the state's requiring that, okay, it's a state of emergency, you have a remote meeting, the remote meeting is defined by the fact that one of the commissioners is participating remotely in the public hearing. You're saying that triggers the 24-hour comment period after that hearing.
Yes, sir.
That's right.
Does the state mandate that you not vote until after that 24-hour period? Or does it even get into that?
The state does not mandate it. For whatever reason, it just said that comments must be accepted for 24 hours after the hearing.
Common sense would tell you, well, if you're going to listen to comments after the fact, you want to vote after the fact. And
Right.
it's not
That's
the
right.
board would do that, but if the board just said, we've heard enough, we want to go ahead and vote, and if they comment, so be it, and taking political pressure for that, they can't do that.
The statute is silent on that. I think you may then get
Even
into.
with the person being remote, I mean, that's what I'm thinking. A vote is a vote.
So what you're saying is, you're going to refer to the statute, which we're bound by anyway, and then whenever the time comes, you cross that bridge when you get to it.
That's right.
Amen.
Amen to that.
Let's just don't have any more emergencies.
Kids don't have public hearings during states of emergency.
There you go.
And then Gina, I believe that is it.
Well, we got 32 up here with a lot of red on it. I don't know if that's just a recap of,
Yeah, that's when changes are made to these, we recap that in red.
okay.
So-
All right.
That's all it does.
I just want to make sure, Ben, we got some red verbiage
Yeah,
in there.
it's starting to bleed all over that page. So obviously there would be another section to Rule 32 added, just saying that it would be, when it is actually passed, it would say amended on
Yeah.
whatever date, and then
Okay.
just give a brief synopsis.
It would take out that one section
Okay.
too.
Any more questions for Thomas?
Did good.
You did a great job. Sorry we had so many questions, but now's the best time to ask them.
That's why I told Gina I wanted to come forward today, is because I was like, there's a lot of questions I need answers to, so. I will thank you for that.
All right,
Hey,
thank
you
you.
did a great job, Thomas. This is Commissioner McCoy. I hope I didn't give you a hard time.
Good morning.
Morning.
I want to introduce Mark Tucci, Program Director for the District 11A Veterans Treatment Court. Mark's here and will speak in a moment, but I wanted to give you some background on the Veterans Treatment Court and the grant process throughout the history of the court prior to that discussion. So from October 1st, 2016 until September 30th of 2019, the Veterans Court operated using 2 federal grants. There was a just under $1 million grant for 3 years from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, along with a $400,000 3-year grant from the Bureau of Justice Assistance under the DOJ. That totaled about $1.4 million for 3 years, with an annual breakdown of just under $460,000 a year. Both grants ran out on September 30th, 2019. The Veterans Court received authorization to use any remaining SAMHSA funds through December 30th of that year. The court was also approved for another 3-year BJA grant from October 1st, 2019 through September 30th of 2022. That is for, I believe, $450,000 over 3 years. That left a 6-month gap in funding from the SAMHSA grant from January 1st through June 30th of this year. So we had discussions, the board was part of those discussions, and Lee County stepped up and contributed $85,000 in funding, and Harnett County budgeted to fill the remainder of that gap and close it through the end of this fiscal year. The General Assembly also included a $150,000 appropriation in the vetoed budget, and Sandhill Center was set to receive some funding that would allow it to provide additional support to Veterans Court. However, as you know, that budget was vetoed, has not been overridden, and that funding has not materialized. So that brings us to July 1st of this year and the upcoming fiscal year. Veterans Court has applied for a new 5-year SAMHSA grant that, if received, would provide a total of, I believe, $2 million from October 1st of 2020 to September 30th of 2025. That would continue operating the court under its current operations, while also providing, I believe, some additional services to expand the court's substance abuse treatment capacity. We will likely not know whether or not that grant has been received until September of this year.
July.
Oh, July, good. That's helpful. So assuming the SAMHSA grant is approved, that will leave a gap of nearly $50,000 needed to get Veterans Court from July 1st of this year through September 30th until that grant picks up. And this funding has been included in your proposed budget that you've received. In the event that SAMHSA grant is not approved, the Veterans Court has provided a budget for funds that would be required from October 1st of this year through June 30th of 2021, and that figure is just under $103,000. My understanding is that this budget does provide for some reduction in the court's current level of operation where possible, but there are also some requirements to receive that BJA grant in terms of the amount of veterans that have to be admitted to the program every month. So I want to be clear that that additional $103,000 is at this time not included in the proposed budget. We will continue communicating with our legislative delegation to ask that the funding previously budgeted for the Veterans Court that was not approved in the budget is provided either through another budget or via an alternative option if available. So we met with Mark on April 20th, and he made us aware that it was his intention to apply for another 3-year BJA grant because you don't have to, you can have multiple BJA grants at the same time. That if received would provide a total of $500,000 for 3 years from October 1st of 2020 through September 30th of 2023. And Mark is here to present to you today because the Harnett County fiscal policy, which you updated on February 17th of this year, requires that if the grant requires a county match, either cash or in kind, or the funder expects the county to continue to fund a position or program after the grant is complete, then the grant application must be submitted to the Board of Commissioners for approval. And there is no match required for this grant. But I've asked Mark to come before you today and discuss what this grant includes and how it fits into the overall picture of the Veterans Treatment Court.
Thank you, Brian. We'll gladly hear you, Mark.
Well, thank you, Commissioners, for allowing me to speak to you. It's good to see other people. I've been in office for the last 3 or 4 weeks by myself, and it's just good to see other people other than my wife. I want to thank, I just want to thank y'all, the staff. I mean, Chris, Brian, Kim, Paula, and Jamie, who I work with every day, to keep this Veterans Treatment Court operational and running and paying all the bills and all that. They do such a great job, and they need to be very much commended for what they do. They're so helpful, and also for some of our positions, which are contractual positions, working with the county on that. It's really good. Well, so we're living in a new normal, aren't we? This pandemic has changed a lot of things, how we operate, how we go to church, and everything else. And it hit us in the court. We got notice that we could no longer operate a Veterans Treatment Court. Well, I want you to know the Harnett County Veterans Treatment Court was the first Veterans Treatment Court in the state to start back and operating a Veterans Treatment Court. But we're doing it digitally. We're doing it by video. We've got veterans that are calling in and communicating and speaking to the judge each week. We're continuing to operate. We also are testing them. We're testing them for drugs and alcohol and other things. And how we're doing that? We're doing it by video. We actually sent out saliva test kits where we actually sit there and watch them get tested over the video, and we can actually see the results on these test kits. And that's just good oversight on our part, and as a result of some of the things that we've done, the state has adopted pretty much our model. And I was on the phone this morning with the National Association of Drug Court Professionals out of DC. They wanted to know more about what we were doing. So we're definitely making an impact, because we got to get out of there, pretty much out of our normal ways of operating and try to accomplish the missions that we need to do under this new normal. So, in fact, there's going to be a virtual visit by DC on the end of June for a 3-day operation, and they're actually going to evaluate our court and part of our grant that we have. So we found out, talking with our BJA GPO, that's our grant projects officer, she's responsible for ensuring that we run our grants correctly. She advised me that we can apply for a grant each year while we have a grant. So long as you apply for one grant under the BJA enhancement grant criteria, then you can do it every year. Well, this is the first time we realized we could do that. I mean, for the last, the 3 years we were doing, we were sitting there on our hands and waiting and said, I'll be glad whenever this grant's over with so we can apply for another grant. Well, now it's kind of freed us so we can continue to operate and move this process and this funding forward. So basically, this $500,000 3-year grant is a one-time grant. We will not come back to the board and ask for anybody to be continued or anything else. This is basically taking what we've done and enhanced it and written it into a proposal to establish funds. And so the Harnett County Veterans Treatment Court is requesting Bureau of Justice Assistance 2020 Adult Drug Court and Veterans Treatment Court Discretionary Grant Program. It's a Type A, Category 2 competition, ID BJA 2020-17-100, funds in amount of $500,000. And the purpose is to enhance Veterans Treatment Court based on the current pandemic, to assist nonviolent offenders with successful rehabilitation from the use of drugs and alcohol and mental health issues. And the population we're looking at serving is high risk, high need, and looking at areas of high poverty. We're looking at like areas like Dunn and those areas where we can actually get these veterans that can't come to court. Let's do what we're doing right now, and let's put them on video and actually get them tested and get somebody, a case manager on them, and get a regional coordinator to go out and coordinate with those local communities and find those resources and enhance it. And that's what we're looking at doing. Increase the ability of our veterans into our program by leveraging judicially approved video conferencing capability. That's one of our goals. The second goal is to provide telehealth, mental health, and substance use disorder, outpatient treatment, evidence-based psychotherapy, and corresponding psychiatric medication management. Our third goal is to establish socially distanced random drug use testing is being administered to all participating veterans, and also provide peer support services to each participating veteran. And it all adheres to the 10 best practices for NADCP, and also for the best practice standards that have been identified, and the key components to the Veterans Treatment Court. What we're looking at basically is a regional coordinator, which is a full-time person, a case manager, which would be a part-time position, and a legal assistant, which would cover that gap that we currently have. With that, it'd be some mileage for travel and supplies, and the opportunity for that regional coordinator to go to the national conference and all that for those 3 years. But it's going to be one of those 3 years. Hopefully in 3 years we'll have a vaccine to fix this pandemic. But in the meantime, I think this is a great fit. And I tell you, looking at the persistent poverty areas and those high poverty areas like Dunn in those areas, this is a thing that they want us to write in the grant. So that's what I'm going with, and it's due 1 June. And with your permission, I'm going to continue to write. I was in charge of 16,000 people in Afghanistan and Iraq at the embassy. I ran the embassy security operations there, and I came home for leave, and this little thing says, "Hey, temporary job, working as a coordinator for a Veterans Treatment Court." I didn't realize that God had me to apply for that job, and as a result, this has been the best job in my life. And we're saving lives. This pandemic has taken one of our veterans' lives in our court, and but we're saving lives. And the veteran that we had last week spoke to the judge, and he broke down on the website, and he says, "I just needed somebody to talk to," and the judge is there, and that's the reason why we're continuing to operate our Veterans Treatment Court under these conditions and won't stop. So, anybody got any questions for me regarding this grant?
I got something. Commissioner Johnson, when you're talking about doing remote drug testing, how many of your veterans actually have access to the electronic devices to be able to do that?
We actually mail them the actual drug test, and we give them enough. The minimum, the random, the standard is they've got to get tested a minimum twice a week, and some of these tests can reach back to 72 hours for alcohol. And so it tells us whether their drugs of choice are. We identify those, but we're actually testing all 12 to 14 different drugs and also alcohol. But we mail that to them, and they have to call in every day, and it tells you have to test or you don't have to test. And it's totally random. They can go for 5 days and all of a sudden get tested twice. So the goal is they'll never know if they've got a test tomorrow or not.
Are you talking about viewing them remotely, taking the test?
Yes, and it's saliva-based. It's not urine-based. It's saliva-based, so they actually sit there and watch them swab their mouth.
Do all your clients have a computer that you can sit there and watch them do that?
Our field treatment compliance officer is the one that goes and actually, and he's trained to do that.
So he goes to them for that test and he watches them? Okay, I got it.
Absolutely. We got 2 people that are trained. Yeah, we don't allow anybody to do it. That individual has been trained by the probation, parole, community service, so there's a standard there for them to apply with.
Thank you.
Yes. Anybody else?
Thank you, Mark. We appreciate you coming. It's very, very informative.
Thank you, sir. Y'all have a beautiful day.
Thank you.
Next up is County Manager's Report.
All righty, if you will look in front of you, you should have the Board of Commissioners meeting for May 18th draft agenda. We'll go through that, see if you have any questions. Okay, item on the consent agenda is 4D, where Harnett County Library requests approval to accept $4,000 in COVID-19 response mini grant from the Department of Cultural Resources. Is there, Brian knows more about that than I do. I'm going to let him share with you about what that is.
Yes, and this item is pending internal review. Angela was made aware of an opportunity to apply for some COVID-19 related grant funding through the LSTA, Department of Cultural Resources, and these grant funds would be for some of the, the plexiglass screening, the different items that would be needed to help reopen the library under, a different social distancing model, as well as funding to supply some of those supplies for the municipal libraries as well. And that grant has been approved by the state, pending your approval.
Okay. All right, 4F was the revised rules of procedure of the Harnett County Board of Commissioners that we just talked about with Thomas, and that'll be done with the revisions that you discussed earlier, so we'll make note of that. And then Steve had talked about the water meters, advanced water metering infrastructure project ordinance. You see that amount, if you're comfortable with that. And number, yeah, sure.
So Mr. Teachy was seeking approval to apply for that grant. Do y'all want that put on the consent agenda to formally approve?
I think consensus would be fine.
Or do you want to give consensus now, or how do y'all want to do that? Because he's applying for it, will he come back for permission to accept, or?
Yes, you'll have to come back to accept.
Yes.
Are y'all okay?
Is there a consensus that, because it's a grant, so is there a consensus of those? I see everybody's shaking their head affirmative, so we'll put that as a consensus.
Because when they receive it, they got to come back
When
to us.
they receive the grant, then they'll come back and make their formal presentation back that this grant's been received.
Okay. You also have, besides you in yellow, highlighted about the appointments needed. Any questions on that?
I just want to say that we as the commissioners appreciate each and every citizen that applies and commit to serving on these boards.
definitely. There are a lot of boards to consider.
And it's not
Sometimes
really,
It's a chore to get them, and I echo those comments. We do appreciate that.
we appreciate them, because it's giving up their free time to serve this county.
Helping our community. Okay, item 6 is the presentation of county's audit for fiscal year 2019-2020. And talking with Kimberly, they would like to do that remotely. Are you okay with that?
So we can't shoot at them?
No, but they are restricted from travel, just like we are. So if you need them here, I mean, I told them that, you know, we want a changed way of, what I'm looking for, but we're on a revised way of operating, but we could still have him come in here, if you guys needed him. But normally they're not allowing that staff to travel.
Yeah.
So it's totally up to you.
Is everybody okay with that?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Item 7 is a public hearing on Harnett County's fiscal year 2020-2021 budget. And as I mentioned earlier, there will be ample opportunity for other workshops and for public comment. This proposed recommended budget is on the website, as well as it lays outside in our foyer here at this building at 420 McKinney Parkway for any citizen to come look at it in a hard copy. And any questions, concerns, or comments that any citizens want to make, they can always email our clerk as well.
And they would take that hard copy with them
Yes.
right now, and we would print another one.
Yeah, this is it. So if anybody wants it, it's right here. All you have to do is come to 420 McKinney Parkway, and a hard copy is available.
There's actually one out on the,
That's
in
it.
the, what I call the vestibule.
I stole it.
I can put it outside the door if I need to, the wind's gonna blow it.
That's right, that's right. But it is available online as well.
Okay.
So, and then what you see here also is just, as you're well aware, we had a separate general statute with the economic development budget, so we just put that in there as well. And Gina has already advertised this. And so that we'll look at doing that on the 18th of May. As I mentioned earlier, you do have a workshop on the 26th, Board of Commissioners meeting on the 1st, and a workshop on June 9th. So, and if the commissioners are comfortable with this, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we were looking at a possible adoption on the 15th of June.
That's right.
Is that what we said?
Yeah. Well, we're running out of time. We've got to, we pretty much got to do it by.
Yeah, that's right.
And if there's anything, as Cully said earlier, specific that you would like us to be prepared to discuss on the next work session, then feel free to let us know either today or before then.
Oh, okay. Yeah, good point. Are you comfortable with us doing the public hearing that's highlighted on the second page of this draft agenda?
The third page under conduct, and it's sort of what we talked about with Thomas, is, you know, people will be able to call in and give public comment during that meeting, or give comment during the public hearings. They can submit things in writing, and all. I mean, that's how things are laid out right now for us to do it. So just to make sure you all are good with going forward with that.
I think it's a good idea.
I think it's a good idea. We continue the way what you proposed.
Okay, everybody's comfortable with that?
Good.
Okay. Let's see. Okay. Talked about the applications. You have those in front of you as well for appointments. You also have your invitation and upcoming meeting schedule in front of you as well that I mentioned earlier. And Brian, would you like to comment on the CRF funding? Sure.
Just to provide you an update, I'm sure you've probably been following, the General Assembly has allocated around $2.46 million to Harnett County from the Federal CARES Act for Harnett County. And that funding must be spent to offset coronavirus-related expenses. It, at this point, is not something that can be used to replace lost revenue, whether it's through tax dollars or through what Steve was talking about earlier with those fees. Although there is an assumption that the federal government will hopefully address that in the future with some additional funding that's been allocated by the state. But these, the requirements are that the expenditures have to be necessary expenditures incurred due to the public health emergency with respect to the coronavirus disease. Funding that was not accounted for in the budget most recently approved as of March 27th of this year. And expenses that were incurred during the period that begins March 1st of this year and ends December 30th. We have to, as a county, submit our plan to the state by June 1st of this year. So we actually have an internal meeting tomorrow to begin getting all of that together to discuss options. Obviously, that's a substantial amount of money. We have been asking departments to track their COVID-related expenses as well as try their best to project additional expenses needed through the end of the year, as well as the towns, because there is a part of this funding model that would allow the county to provide any funding to towns for those similar expenses, but they have to all meet those guidelines. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask, but otherwise that's kind of the plan going forward.
Brian, I have a question. Commissioner McCoy.
Yes, ma'am.
Will we receive a report as to what you all come up with, how the money is being spent?
Yes, ma'am. We can certainly do that, and it will have to be tracked very very strictly. For the state has actually set up a complete office to oversee that those funds. So yes, ma'am. And we can certainly present an outline of a plan prior to June 1st if that's the board's wishes as well.
So your meeting tomorrow, is that also going to be included with the municipalities? Because obviously they've got to be following the same criteria that the county has to.
I have reached out to all of the city and town managers to let them know, and they are aware of this, but to track their COVID-related expenses as well, and to report that back to us. And we have gotten some of that back, but some of the other towns are working through budget, and they will be submitting that. But we want to have a full picture. The meeting tomorrow will just be county internal staff to really just talk about what we believe are expenses that will actually be covered under this act, and to kind of brainstorm some other options. Because obviously, I think if you were to look at what the county specifically has done internally and with the towns, it's not probably going to touch that 2.46 million. But there may be other avenues that we can do to help use those funds for the betterment of our community.
Okay, thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'd like to just read something just to clarify, because this is a very unusual situation where you're talking with the county budget as far as what we're dealing with COVID-19. If you'll allow me,
Sure.
I'd just like to read that statement on here. Okay, so for public hearing on Harnett County's fiscal year 2020-2021 budget will be held during the board's regular May 18th meeting. Citizens may submit their comments regarding the budget in writing to our county clerk, Gina Wheeler, which is gwheeler@harnett.org, no later than noon on Monday, May 18th. And comments will be read aloud during the meeting. If you prefer to call in and provide your comments verbally, you may do so by dialing 910-814-6959. That's 910-814-6959 at 6 p.m. on May 18th. So I'd just like to make that clear, just so our citizens understand the process of what we're doing with that.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying that, Colin.
Thank you.
Yes, next up, you're going to discuss the upcoming Board of Adjustments meeting in June, or?
Yes, I'm sorry, I did go over that. Okay, let me ask the board how you feel about this. In talking with Development Services, they canceled the May Planning Board and Board of Adjustment. However, they would like to move forward with the June Board of Adjustment and Planning Board. They would like to set up kind of like what we've done right here with practicing social distance, 6 foot apart, hand sanitizer, things of that nature. Only have 10 in the room, and as the cases come, they would have them sit in a separate area and then come into the council chambers to discuss. Are you comfortable with letting them do that and moving forward with that the first week of June?
We're all shaking our heads, yes, so it's a consensus that we allow that to
What
happen.
they did was just delay, obviously, the May one, so it'll come straight to June, and then you'll hear about that in your workshop. I think they had a couple of rezoning cases, and then, of course, the Board of Adjustment is decided by that board. So
Okay.
if you're comfortable with that, we'll allow them to go ahead and move forward with that.
Consensus of the board is that would be allowed.
Okay. Thank you.
And then I don't know if y'all have got in y'all's package, Well, you've already gone over the review of
And then
openings,
the
so.
appointments, and then you've got your invitations and dates of interest as well.
Well, county attorney, do we have need, I'm sorry, attorney to the board, do we have need for a closed session?
Mr. Chairman, I have no need for a closed session.
You're a good attorney.
You earned your stripes.
Is there any other business we need to discuss? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We got two motions, and I guess one of them will be a second. We're not gonna do a roll call. All in favor say aye. Aye. It's unanimous. We are adjourned.
All right, thank you very much.
Gina.